Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
One of my mentors says, what you learn is equally as important as who you learn it from. There's a relationship, a direct relationship between the message and the messenger. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. Stay tuned.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and it's pretty obvious that who you learn a lesson from makes a big difference. I hearken back to my days as a teenager. I had a friend that we used to work on my old car together all the time. But there were many times that he would say something like, I think it's the connuitator valve. I learned that in the Army. We were still in high school. He's never been in the Army. There's no chance he's been in the Army. Wasn't old enough to be in the Army. But he was willing to tell you, I learned that myself in the Army. It's the connuitator valve. You need to fix that. I also remember a time that the two of us together built a chair. It was really kind of a cool chair. It was a little low, so it was like a chillin' recliner kind of a chair. But we found the instructions in a home woodworking magazine at the grocery store, and we decided to build it. And we did. And it was really cool until one day we were sitting in it and it just collapsed. I mean, the whole thing just fell to the floor with us in it. And we both laughed at each other, and he said, must have been the terminal bypass. I'm like, I don't know what a terminal bypass is or if a chair made of wood and cloth has one, but okay. See, I was learning these lessons from a messenger that didn't have the qualifications to deliver the message. Didn't have the history, the credibility, or the credentials to deliver the message. Now, does that taint the message? In that case, absolutely. But see, one of the challenges we have as leaders and communicators is that often we have a message for people about their work excellence, about the work that they should be doing, about having empathy for other people on the team, about understanding what the standards are for our team, company, organization. And the message that we want to convey to them, well, it has to be really clear about what those standards are, what their performance should be against those standards. Some companies call them KPIs, key performance indicators. Some organizations, without those KPIs, there's no way to get an employee evaluation. And without that, there's no way to get a raise. And so these standards are put in place. And these key performance indicators, these tools of measurement, are used to determine, are you worth keeping? Do you deserve a raise? Are you worthy of a promotion? Do you need to find another job? And these key performance indicators are a static measurement most of the time. They're not fluid and dynamic. And if they are, it's from person to person or from team to team or from task to task. But generally speaking, once those standards are set, we don't move them up and down based on a person's performance. We continue to push them to improve to be better people. What happens, though, when the person doing that evaluation, the person measuring you against those KPIs, has major character flaws, issues with integrity? Maybe they're measuring one of your performances. Do you get tasks done on time, and yet they're late for everything? They're late for every meeting. You've met those people that others have said of them, they'll be late for their own funeral. Timeliness is not their strength. And yet, seems that they come down on you as a leader of yours, saying you need to be on time more often. You need to be more diligent to showing up. And you failed to do that. It seems really ironic when you're the person being led, if your leader holds you to standards that they don't live up to. What if you're the leader? Are you living up to the same standards that you're exacting from others, that you're counting on from them, that you're demanding of them, that you're expecting of them? Now, are these expectations something that you put into place? Are these parameters you decided on? Are these limitations that come from the guidance of your own mind, your own imagination, your own expectations? What if we take that outside the work world and we take that to our personal relationships? Do we have expectations for the people in our circle that we can't live up to? Do we expect things of them to get done, to be done at a certain level of excellence or expectation, and they just don't? Here's a tougher question. Do we have those expectations not established in a clear way for anybody else to know, that we hold inside of our own mind, perhaps even in our own heart? We have these expectations of others that have never been clearly articulated. And yet, the failure to meet them comes with consequences. I challenge you to really think through that one, because there's odds are really high that you have some conflict in relationships based on missed expectations. Expectations that were never clearly articulated. Is there any chance? Is there any chance you're disappointed with someone when they fail you, or upset with them because they just didn't do what you thought they were going to do, but you never really told them to do it in the first place? You never really told them, I expect this of you. You never set out, because it's a personal relationship, it's not work. Why would you have KPIs for that? Key performance indicators. Why would you even have a measurement for how somebody else treats you? Their courteousness, their empathy. Why would you even set a parameter like that? I mean, it's a personal relationship. This is my son, my daughter, my wife, my husband, my neighbor, my cousin, my parents, my grandparents. We recently had a set of twins born in our family just before Christmas. And before anybody got to see the babies. In fact, while the babies were still inside, Mommy sent out a nice little text to everybody in the family, and she said, no kissing the babies. It's flu season. We have families scattered all over the country. No kissing the babies. If you hold the babies, wash your hands first. If you hold the babies, I'll hand you the baby, and I will make sure that you know how to hold the baby, because we're not just talking about parents and grandparents. We're talking about kids. We're talking about siblings. We're talking about cousins. Parameters, expectations. Now, did it seem a little pushy to some people? Well, of course it did, because they've never been given parameters before. They've never been given boundaries in their relationship to know how to properly act. And when you've just plowed through your life and all of your relationships, presuming that, well, whatever makes me feel good, that's the right thing. If I'm happy with it, everybody ought to be happy with it. Now, I want you to ask yourself, honestly, have you been that kind of person as a leader? Have you been that kind of person in your personal relationships where you're not really clear on what your boundaries or expectations are? Those are opposite ends of the spectrum, by the way. You expect people to perform to a certain high standard. You want the best out of them and the best from them and the best for them, hopefully. But on the other end, you got boundaries, and that's kind of this is all I'm going to stand. I can't stand no more, as Popeye might say. And so you have boundaries to say, don't treat me like that or I'm out of here. And you have expectations that say, I expect you at least, at a minimum, to do this. Be courteous. Open the door. Be courageous in saying what you want, telling me what your expectations are. Those are some expectations that you might have in a relationship. And some boundaries. Look, if you slam the door in my face again, I'm not coming back. If you treat me like that, or if you treat my children like that, or if you treat my family like that, I'm out. Those are reasonable boundaries and expectations to establish. The challenge for many is that they're never clear about what those expectations or boundaries are. But they're very clear about consequences. If you don't make me happy, I'm going to do this. Or, how dare you not make me happy? And the challenge is, nobody knows how to make you happy, because you're not even sure about it yourself, probably. That's why you haven't established it with anybody to say, you know what would really make me happy? If you did blah, 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 blah. If you behaved blah, 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 blah. If you said these things, that would really make me happy. My wife and I, years ago, we've been married over 30 years now, probably 20, 25 years ago, we took a couple of various relationship tests. One of those was the love languages. And the 5 love languages, we determined mine is touch. Now, it doesn't have to be a sexual touch or anything of that nature, but to hold my hand, to sit beside me, to lean on my shoulder. When I fall asleep at night, she scratches my back. Now, ironically, early on, that was a hard thing to come by because touch is not in her top 5. Just not her thing. And so for me to sit beside her and hold her hand or put my hand on her or put my arm around her, it took some getting used to because that wasn't in her wheelhouse. Now, ironically as well, the thing that I am the worst at is words of encouragement. Because I've always lived in that life where setting high expectations and setting high standards is kind of the minimum. In fact, I had an exit interview one time where a boss told me the hardest job you're going to have being in a big corporate America, because I was leaving a company of about 30 and going into a top 50, a Fortune 50 company. He said the biggest trouble you're going to run into is that you have such high standards for yourself and everybody around you. And that's great as a driving force. It's really hard when you get into a big corporate environment because so few people are going to live up to those standards. You're going to find yourself extremely frustrated. Part of that in me also means I get very frustrated when the spoken and unspoken, yes, this is a me problem that I have to work on, but I'm guessing there's a couple of you that might have the same problem. I set these really high standards for myself. I expect these really high standards of others, and I get frustrated when they don't meet them. The irony is, a lot of the people who struggle with those standards are also gifted, like my wife is gifted. She's a great, merciful, graceful leader. She is an influencer who says very few words, but her number one love language is words of affirmation. She wants you to say, you've done a great job. She wants to hear, I love you, I care about you, I'm ecstatic with what you've done and how you are and who you are. And the more of those words there are, the better. Unfortunately for me, that's not my natural reaction to anybody. It's not that I don't appreciate people, I do. Gratitude is a hard thing for me. Expressing it in the right words. As a wordsmith, you would think I'd be better at that. Well, I can feign them. I can make up the right words. I can choose the right words. I can even articulate the right words with the right emotion because I'm a great communicator. That's what I do. But is it the natural bent for me? No. It's a skill set I'm still learning to master. Now, as a leader, as a communicator, the message and the messenger, they go hand in hand. And if you're unwilling to admit that or unaware that it's true, then the challenge you're going to run into is you're going to feel sometimes like, because I have the authority, I have the position, I have the title, I have the money, I hired the people. Because all that is true, then when I make a statement, everybody should take it at face value. This idea that I can come in late, but others better be on time. If I call from the road, you better be there. If I'm stuck in traffic, you should already be there. There are a lot of leaders that lead like that. I've worked for them. I've worked with them. I've left them and moved on to better things in life. Because a leader who holds you to a standard they're not willing to stand up to, not live up to, an expectation they can't keep themselves, that's going to be a challenge. That's going to be a challenge for anybody. First place, it's going to be a challenge in the relationship. Because the message it's sending is, I have high hopes and high expectations for you. I have high standards for you. I have consequences for you when you don't meet those standards or live up to those expectations. But don't hold me to the same thing. Well, that is a message of inconsistency and incongruence. That incongruent message creates cognitive dissonance. It causes you to think and feel about the same thing completely differently. And that's a problem. It's also a barrier to trust. And so when the message and the messenger begin to get separated, you have a problem. You have a problem with leadership. You have a problem with communication. And as John Maxwell says, leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. When you separate communication from messaging, from leadership, your influence is gone. You're not really leading anymore. At that point, you're just talking to the wind. The real challenge, though, is sometimes the message and the messenger are congruent. but outside forces push against both. Sometimes the message and the messenger are congruent, but outside forces push against both. Now, this happens in a sales competition arena where you've got one company bidding for your business and another one fighting against them in this bidding process. And one of the things that I've been told over and over in sales, and I've learned in sales, and it's a natural bent. I have to fight against it because I grew up kind of fighting my way through life. When you're proposing your sales pitch and you know someone else is as well, it's very tempting because we see it in politics. It's very tempting because we see it in high school. It's very tempting because we grow up with this pattern of competition and competitiveness. It's very tempting to look at the opponent and go, well, but they're not as good because. And although it seems to be the natural course of things, it happens in sales, it happens in politics, it happens on the playground, it happens in middle school and high school, it happens in college. This competition between two people can sometimes get vitriolic. And sometimes the linguistics that we choose to use to make ourselves appear better also demeans, destroys, impugns the character of the person we're competing against. I want you to let that settle for a minute, because the irony is there are very few people who will hear two people bickering back and forth amongst each other or about each other and look at that and choose one over the other because of the bickering. In fact, it's often the case that salesperson A and salesperson B, two different companies, two different products, offering the same solution, when they start bickering with each other, the customer walks away to find something else. They look for another solution. And it's a natural thing in us. Oh yeah, we love to see a fight. I don't know why that is, that morbid curiosity, the same thing that causes people to grab their cell phone and watch a car wreck rather than rescue the people that are trapped in it. It's our twisted human bent. That's who we are. And while we may like to watch the bickering, the fighting between the two salespeople, we might even like that art of war nature of watching them go back and forth with each other as the price comes down and down and down and the features go up and up and up, because eventually that's going to benefit us. But the truth of the matter is, inside, internally, in ourself, in our soul, we're not comfortable watching two people bicker. Or watching them say, well, you did this, well, you could have done that, well, you could do this better, and your product's not as good as, and your service is not as good as, your customer service. Nobody really wants to hear from that, and nobody really wins from that. That's a hard truth. And so when two salespeople are making a pitch to a company, the first one to go negative on their opponent usually loses. The first one to say, well, but yours doesn't do, and you can't keep up with, and your price is too high. Well, why don't you, as a sales rep, and hold this in your mind as a leader, as a family leader, as a manager, as an influencer, rather than talk negatively about the other guy, the other gal, the competitor, the other person who wants the job, rather than attacking them, spend more time focused on the positive result that the client will get from working with you. It changes so much. The level of humility and maturity that comes with, I'm not concerned with what the competitor is doing. I'm focused on, am I offering the very best product or service that I have to offer? Am I offering it at a fair price for the market, whether it's a little below or a little above or exactly the same as those you might consider my competitors? If I'm offering a good service, a good product, if I'm standing behind that in the relationship that we'll have with each other to make sure that you get the results that you're after, then I'm doing the very best that I can. And what everybody else is doing doesn't matter. Unless I can learn from it how I can do what I do better, I'm not concerned with what they're doing. And I'm certainly not going to stand here and argue with you or try to convince you that what they're doing is less than what I do. Because my attacking them makes us bickering soldiers. You don't want to deal with either one of us. And if I'm the only one attacking them and they're not attacking back, then the choice becomes clear. Nobody wants to work with the bickering one. The challenge for a lot of people is that they take their advertising, their marketing message, they take it to heart. They believe their own press. They are everything the ad team says they are. But then they can't stand it behind it. And then the outside attack occurs when that other competitor, and it may not even come in the form of an attack. It may be that they simply demonstrate through their client reviews, through their customer service, through their answering of questions, through the provision of their service and their products that they're superior. And now all of a sudden, you have this threat. It's an internal threat that because the customer, the consumer, the buying public has chosen somebody else, rather than take that as, okay, we need to up our game in the communication arena, we need to up our game in the product and service arena, we need to up our game in the customer testimonial, we often take that as a personal attack. And we look at it and we say, my message is good, but they didn't buy, that must mean the messenger is bad. And we intentionally separate ourselves from the message to say, well, if somebody else made my presentation, it would close better. If I used AI to make my presentation, I would have more sales. If I marketed that in another place and I used a prettier face or a better voice or a better dialogue or a better script, then it would be all good. The product and service don't need changed, just the way that we present it. And so now we have this dichotomy again that we've created on our own. Are the message and the messenger the same? And if they're not, who's to blame? Well, I'm going to tell you the hardest challenge, but the sweetest victory, is when you begin to hear those words from your customers. I got everything I expected, and working with you was a joy. Working with your team was a pleasure. Getting the results that I wanted was the icing on the cake. I enjoyed the relationship. I enjoyed the time that I spent with you. It was off the charts good for me, for my team, for my organization. Now, when you focus on being the best leader, influencer, product provider, service provider, and your messaging flows from that focus of being the best, then the chances are that the congruence between you as a person, as a leader, as an organization, as an entity, and the delivery of your message, your marketing, your advertising, your leadership within your own organization, the people that you lead, and the way that you develop the leaders within your team, when those things are consistent, then the outbound message to your client is trustworthy. And when that message is trustworthy and you deliver on the promises that you make, then you're going to change the world. You're going to grow your business. You're going to go to the next level. Here's the hardest part about all of that is that keeping all of those things consistent from the persona that you are, which really means working on you first, to the way that you treat the people on your team, who are the ones who deliver the products and services you offer, to the marketing and brand messaging that you put out there to the world for them to look at, to the actual delivery of the product and service. Doing that is a daily, minute-by-minute task. That's harder work than producing the product or the service that you present to the public. It's harder work than delivering the product or service that you deliver to the customer. It's even harder than getting the win or the solution that you want for them, because that internal work of being the kind of leader that stands up behind that product, then when people see the product or service, they go, oh, I know where that came from. I know that their leader will stand behind it. I can tell you a closing story. I had an Apple iPhone when they first came out, like an 6 or 8, like way back when. I bought it. I'd only had it for a couple of weeks, and it just freaked out on me. Literally just lost its mind. I took it back to the T-Mobile store that I got it from. They gave me another one, new in a box, sealed in plastic, new IMEI number on it, the whole thing. Good to go. Less than 24 hours later, I would be on the phone, it would just turn itself off, and I'm like, what the heck? And so I went back to the store and spent about, no exaggeration, 8 hours that day in that store, trying to fix the problem, trying to solve the problem, trying to get another phone. The guy at the counter said, we don't have to give you another phone. We just gave you another new one. And I said, that's funny because I just called Apple. I gave them the IMEI number and they said that phone has been set for destruction. We can't service it. So tell me how you gave me a brand new phone out of the box and it's already set for destruction. How does that happen? Well, it took about 8 hours to get to the bottom of things. And apparently what happened was the company that provides insurance on the phones had taken one in that was damaged, in their mind refurbished it and put it back in the marketplace. But according to Apple, the problem that phone had was in its motherboard, and it was an unserviceable problem. You could do all the other stuff to it, clean it up, do the typical refurbs, reset everything, delete all the old data, install the new apps, all good to go, right? No, the motherboard had a flaw in it. And Apple had already identified with that particular device that that motherboard had a flaw in it. There was no fixing it. Just destroy it, we'll replace it with another one. But the T-Mobile customer service team refused to do that. After going back and forth with it, and this has been, well, like I said, it was an Apple 6 or 8, so it's been not only several iterations ago, but probably 10 or 12 years ago, maybe longer than that I had this conflict. But I walked out of the store that day with 2 broken phones. The one that I had traded in because it wouldn't stay on, and the one that was already set for destruction. I had minimal phone service because I had 2 broken devices. And after 8 hours, customer service was done with me. Now, I worked for another large company at the time named Verizon. And so my email said verizon.net. I did not intend for that to be the case. It just was the case. That was my home internet. That was my job. That was who I was and what I did. And I was so frustrated with this process, I sent a text message. I sent a tweet. I put it out on Twitter that my phone had a problem. And I tagged John in it. John, the CEO then of T-Mobile. About 8 hours later, at my desk, I get a phone call. And the person on the other end of the phone said, is this so-and-so? And I said, yes. And he says, did you put a post out on Twitter about this issue with your phone? I said, I did. He said, can you read that IMEI number to me? And I just happened to have it in my briefcase. I put it on my desk. And I read the number to him, and he said, you're right. That phone was set for destruction. I don't know how it ever got back to the store. But I am the direct representative. I'm the executive assistant to the CEO of T-Mobile. And if you'll give me your home address, just destroy those 2 phones, put them in a dumpster, run over them with your car, make sure they don't get back in our system in any way, and I will mail you a new phone of the upgraded model. Sure enough, 2 days later, on my desk was a brand new phone from the executive office with a nice little card from John himself. The message and the messenger have to be consistent. You've got to be willing to stand up behind your brand, your reputation, and your message at all cost. Now, when I say at all cost, we don't have to look far. Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., there have been hundreds throughout history who have been thoroughly convinced of the quality and the content of their message. Not just the product and the service that they offer, but the why behind what they do. And it cost them their life. It's not always that you're going to die, but sometimes you've got to make sacrifices that are inconvenient, that are hard, just to be able to stand up behind your message. Your message may be in the delivery of a product or service. It may be something that you speak to the crowd in front of you. It may be the expectations you set on your employees or your friends and family. But whatever that message is, if you're going to be the messenger consistent with that message, if that message challenges others, you better be ready to live up to it. And if you expect it to follow that entire course from internally to your team, to your messaging outbound, to the product and service that you deliver, expect to pay a high price for that, because as a leader, it's going to be demanded of you. The message and the messenger have to be consistent. or they will make no transformative impact in society. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. I encourage you to go to storypoweracademy.com and check it out. Look at the different classes, the different levels, the different things that are available. You can take a lot of them a la carte. But spend some time there and see if that's the kind of thing that would change the way you communicate as a leader, as a pastor, as a counselor, as a political leader. And if that will help you, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Again, only 10 people in the elite speakers. You will have to apply for that. But if you're a candidate, I'd love to have that conversation with you. I'm J Loren Norris with Story Power Academy. I look forward to seeing you inside.